Skylark, Chapter 6. The ride home from town was quiet, the wind blowing dust around us. "Any news in town?" asked Sarah wearily. "Some news," said Papa. "Good news." "Good news? What good news?" "Your birthday is coming soon. Mattie wrote to remind me." "She didn't." "She did," said Papa. "So what do you want? Jewels? Silk? Travel?" Sarah laughed. "Travel? Where would I go, Jacob?" "Somewhere green," said Papa. "Somewhere cool." Sarah looked at Papa. "Do you think I would leave?" asked Sarah softly. Papa was silent. "Can we sing, Sarah?" asked Caleb. "It's too hot, Caleb," she said. "Too hot for singing." Papa flicked the reins over the horses' backs, but they wouldn't go faster. "It's even too hot for Jack and old Bess," he said. I leaned back against the empty grain sacks and took out my journal, but it lay in my lap. Caleb moved over close to me. "Why aren't you riding?" "There's nothing to ride," I said, lifting my hair off my neck. "There's nothing good, just the heat. The fields are dried up. There's no rain." "There will be rain," said Caleb. "Papa said so." He pointed. "That was the field where the wildflowers grew. Remember, when Sarah came? The pond was full then. We went swimming and fell asleep in the grass." I stared at Caleb, then out at the fields, remembering when the fields were green, remembering when the days were cool, remembering when Sarah came by train and Caleb and I were afraid that she'd miss the sea. Suddenly Caleb stood up. "Papa, fire!" In the west meadow, a thread of smoke rose. "Hold on," yelled Papa. Sarah dropped to the wagon floor, and we held on as the horses raced for the yard. Papa jumped down. "Soak the grain sacks in the pond water. Hurry!" Sarah and Papa ran to beat out the flames. We could see flames in the dry grasses now. Caleb and I soaked the sacks, then ran closer to the fire, water dripping down our clothes. "Stay back," warned Papa. "There's a wind coming up." Nick and Lottie ran from the barn, barking. And then suddenly Sarah screamed. Her skirt was on fire. Papa turned and threw Sarah to the ground and smothered up the flames with a sack. He pulled her up. "Are you all right?" When Sarah nodded, Papa began to shout at her. "I told you to stay back. You never listen. I told you there was wind." Caleb took my hand. Sarah began beating the fire, now nearly out. "You can't put out the fire alone," she shouted. "Stop yelling at me." And then there was only smoke, the grasses all black and smoldering. Papa beat at one small flame. He stood back, and there was silence. Nick and Lottie stopped barking. "We'll have to watch for fires all the time, now even at night," said Papa, out of breath. Sarah and Papa began walking back to the house. Sarah's hair was down. Her clothes were wet and sooty. Papa looked at her, then away. "You're a sight, you know," he said softly. Sarah didn't answer. Papa looked at her again, then smiled a small smile. "You look beautiful," he said. I held my breath. I had never heard Papa say such a thing to Sarah. Sarah kept on walking. Then she turned and looked at him. "Do you really think I would leave?" she said. "Just for somewhere cool, somewhere green?" This time Papa was silent. The two of them walked away from the blackened grass, past the dogs, and past us, just as if we weren't there. And that night, when Papa went out to close the barn door, Sarah ran after him. I saw them from my window. Papa took Sarah in his arms and kissed her, and they turned around and around and around, dust swirling over them in a cloud.